7 Terrifying Vacation Stories. We sought relaxation, found bone-chilling horror. The sun dipped low, casting eerie shadows over the deserted beach. Waves crashed like thunder, the salty air crackling with tension. This wasn't your typical vacation tale. No, this was the stuff of nightmares. A group of thrill-seeking friends had come here to unwind, but they stumbled upon something unsettling. Each of them felt the hairs on their necks stand, an instinctive warning that not all was right. Just off the coast, the flickering light of an old lighthouse haunted their dreams, but none dared to approach it, until that fateful night. As they settled into their rickety beach house, odd occurrences began. The chairs moved slightly when they weren't looking, and there were strange, echoing whispers dancing through the air. One friend claimed to wake up every night at exactly 3 a.m., feeling a cold breath on his neck. "You guys, something's off here," he said, his voice trembling. They laughed it off, dismissing his fears. Yet anxiety bubbled beneath the surface like a swell before a storm. Days crept by, and they grew more attuned to the dark happenings. A local told them the area was cursed, haunted by the souls of shipwrecked sailors. "They seek revenge," he warned ominously, his voice low. The friends exchanged nervous glances, half believing, other half scoffing at the tale. Late one night, someone dared to venture outside alone, wanting to stand by the water's edge. The ocean roared fiercely, swallowing the sand. Suddenly they heard a splash, a cry that echoed across the dark void of night. Heart racing, they all hurried back inside, fear gripping them tightly. "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect." Their final evening approached, and curiosity morphed into dread. They decided to explore the lighthouse, drawn to it like moths to a flame. Climbing the winding stairs, the air grew heavy, thick with history and whispers. The beam from the lantern flickered, casting shadows that danced wildly. Then, they heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps above them. Goosebumps prickled their skin. Who was up there? Heartbeats quickened as they exchanged terrified looks. What awaited them behind that door at the top? A chilling silence hung in the air, and the door creaked slowly open. What they saw next would haunt them forever. The door swung wide, revealing a dark room filled with rust and decay. Dust motes hung in the air, illuminated by the dim light of the lantern. They could barely make out shapes: a tattered old chair, an empty shelf with remnants of broken bottles. As they stepped inside, the door creaked ominously behind them, as if to warn them back. "Is anyone there?" whispered Sarah, her voice barely rising above the sound of their racing hearts. Only silence answered, thick and suffocating. Each friend held their breath, frozen in fear. But a flicker of movement caught Jake's eye. He backed away, bumping into the others, panic rising in his throat. "Did you see that?" he stammered. "Something moved over there in the corner." The group squinted into the shadows, but all they could see was darkness wrapping around them like a shroud. The oppressive air held a chill, making their skin prickle. They exchanged looks, uncertainty mixing with dread. Should they stay, or should they flee? Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the room, and they jumped, hearts in their throats. Jess, always the brave one, stepped forward. "It's probably just the wind," she said, her voice shaking despite her brave front. But deep down, she longed to believe her own words. "Guys, we shouldn't be in here," Mark said. His face was pale, eyes darting toward the stairs the way out. Let us just go back." They all nodded, but as they turned to leave, the door slammed shut with a thunderous clap. Panic surged through them as they rushed back, but it wouldn't budge. "Seriously? This isn't funny," Sarah shouted, rattling the handle in a desperate attempt to escape. The other friends joined her, their voices rising in urgency, but the door held firm, as if held by a malevolent force. Then came the whispers again. They were clearer this time, echoing around the room, chilling and disembodied. "Get out before it's too late!" A wave of terror washed over them, and they huddled together, trying to determine their next move. "What do they want?" Jake croaked, his voice barely a whisper. "What do we do?" Mark glanced at the window, their only other means of escape. "If we can break that window, we might be able to get out." But urgency turned to horror as they realized the sea was barely visible through the cracks, violent waves crashing against its rocky base far below. "The lighthouse was a beacon for lost souls," Jess muttered, her eyes growing wide as the whispers grew louder around them. "They were calling to us." Just then, as if summoned by their fear, darkness pulled in the corners, forming shapes that loomed over them. Shadows with ghastly faces twisted and melded together, reaching out with bony fingers. The friends gasped, their blood running cold. As they trembled in unison, a voice boomed through the darkness. "You dared disturb our rest." With renewed strength, they pounded on the door as the figures drew closer, their chilling laughter filling the air. In that moment, desperation overpowered fear. They had to break free. But then, far away, they heard it, the faint ringing of a foghorn, echoing from the depths of the dark sea. Was it a signal? A chance to escape? Or something more sinister, beckoning them deeper into the fold of the unknown? The room shrieked with menacing laughter. They could feel the pull of the shadows, drawing them into a suffocating embrace. With a collective scream, they surged toward the door again, but would they be fast enough to outrun the spirits they had awakened? What they didn't know was that their night was only just beginning, and the real horror awaited them just beyond the door. The moment they hurled themselves at the door, the shadows stirred, an ominous swirl of dark energy that roared in delight. The laughter enveloped them, adding weight to the very air they gasped for. Jess felt the chill creep into her bones. They needed to escape, but how? Mark screamed, "It's no use!" Panic flickered in his eyes, the wildness of desperation spilling over. He whipped around, desperation clawing at his throat, shaking his brother, Jake. "We need a plan. Now!" The whispers intensified. They were like an insidious melody, weaving through flesh and bone. "Stay with us forever." The words were tainted with malevolence, twirling around their minds, seeping deep into their thoughts like poison. Sarah, always the one to hold on to hope, pointed toward the window. "It's cracked. Maybe we can break it." "No! The sea!" Jake interjected, shaking his head vehemently. "We can't jump. We'll be swallowed whole." The shadows coiled tighter, and a distinct figure began to take form. It stood near the tattered chair, a tall, gaunt shape, its face obscured by a veil of darkness. But where its eyes should be were two burning embers, glowing with cruel intention. "You cannot leave," it rasped, the voice dragging like nails on a chalkboard. "You trespassed, now you will pay." Just then, a loud crash shattered the moment. The shelving unit tipped over, uprooted by an unseen force, spilling debris across the dusty floor. If there was any chance left, it was now. "Help me!" Jess shouted and lunged for the window, forcing her hands against the jagged glass. "If we break it, we can escape." Mark and Sarah joined her, intent on freeing themselves from the clutches of the darkness. Fingers fumbling, they grabbed anything they could, shoving against the glass, pounding mercilessly. The foghorn-esque call echoed again, sharper now, as if warning them of danger imminent. The figure inched forward, reaching a twisted hand toward Jess. She screamed but didn't stop. With a deafening crack, the window shattered, and shards exploded outward, glinting like teeth under the dim light. Freedom was just within grasp, but then Jake's voice broke through the deafening rush. "Wait! What about the shadows? We don't know what they'll do." Fear danced in their hearts as whispers turned to howls, pushing back against their momentum. An unseen force pulled at their clothes, their skin, begging them not to leave, not to escape. "We have to take the chance," Sarah insisted, eyes wide with terror. With one last surge of adrenaline, they hurled themselves through the broken window, gasping as the icy wind knocked the breath from their lungs. They tumbled onto the rocks below, the world spinning around them. But as they scrambled to their feet, cold realization gripped them, the shadows unfurled behind them, an undulating mass pursuing their every move. "Run!" Mark shouted, already steering Sarah away from the edge. Their feet pounded against the rock-strewn ground, hearts racing with the primal instinct to survive. They were fleeing from something unseen but intimately felt, a darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. But then, ahead, the path diverged into two, one leading down the treacherous cliffs towards the tumultuous sea, and the other deeper into the thick fog that seemed to breathe. "Left or right?" Jess gasped, panic rising again as shadows split from their group, drawn by the uncertainty. Jake's pulse roared in his ears. "I don't know. We split up, maybe we can confuse it?" "No!" cried Sarah, grabbing Jake's arm. "We stay together. We have to stick together." The shadows were edging closer now, and as they watched, thin tendrils snaked out like fingers, reaching hungrily toward them. They had moments, maybe seconds, before it would all unravel. What choice would they make? And what awaited them in the fog? Jess's heart raced as she stared down the two paths ahead. The cliffs loomed perilously close to the ocean, waves crashing violently against the rocks below, a cacophony of danger echoing in her ears. The fog, thick and suffocating, pulled at her, inviting her deeper into its shrouded embrace, where even the shadows hesitated. "Left!" Mark shouted, pointing toward the cliffs, though his voice trembled. "We can make it to the trees. There might be cover." "Are you insane?" Sarah shot back, her face a mask of terror. The fog could be hiding anything or anyone. "We can't just run into the unknown." Another howl came from behind them, an agonizing wail that curled around their minds. It carried a promise of agony and despair, the whisperings beckoning like sirens of the sea, willing them to turn back. "Move!" Mark grunted, yanking Sarah forward. The tendrils of shadow lunged closer, hungry for warmth and life. The decision hung in the air for just a moment longer before Jess seized Jake's arm. "We're not splitting up." "To the cliffs." She didn't wait for an answer. They barreled toward the narrow path leading to the treetops, fear drumming in sync with their pounding hearts. As they ran, Jess caught a glimpse of the shape from before, now looming larger in her peripheral vision. Its ember eyes flickered like dying stars, seething with rage, and for a moment, she couldn't shake the thought, it was angry at them for escaping. "We can't outrun it forever!" Jake shouted, glancing back. His face was pale, and a thin sheen of sweat glistened on his brow. "We will as long as we keep moving," Sarah urged, pulling ahead. "Just keep running." They made a last push toward the trees, their breaths gasping and ragged. The shadows clawed at their heels, swarming like smoke, darting around, darting at them like a predator that could taste their fear. Through the trees, Jess could make out more dim outlines. Branched hands spread wide, reaching for her. Panic threatened to consume her, as she stumbled over a root and nearly fell. "Get up! Jess, come on!" Mark reached back to her, pulling her to her feet as they plunged into the thick underbrush. The darkness flattened against her, whispering lies of giving up, of surrendering, but she couldn't allow it. "Not now." As they forged ahead, branches clawing at their skin, the fog thickened until visibility dwindled to mere inches. The shadows, however, seemed to thrive. "You are lost," they echoed, encapsulating her in an icy grip that chilled her bones. "Don't listen!" Jake shouted, and she could see the strain in his eyes. They were trapped, feeling like wild animals cornered by an unseen predator. Suddenly, Sarah screamed. The twisting tendrils had snaked around her ankle, pulling her down. "Help! Sarah!" Jess cried, reaching for her friend, but the shadows twisted around her, tugging hard. Mark lunged, grabbing the nearest branch while Jake dropped beside Sarah, struggling against the insidious pull. Jess' heart raced, a desperate drum calling her to act. She lunged forward. "Hold on! We're coming!" With a swift swing, Mark brought the branch down, smacking against the shadows engulfing Sarah's legs while Jess unleashed her rage, tearing through the tendrils with both hands. The shadows writhed, snapping back as though stung, but it only fueled their fury. "Keep going! We can't stop!" Mark shouted through gritted teeth as they forced themselves back to the path, fighting against the darkness that rippled like water beneath them. But just as hope flickered, a chill seized Jess's heart when she felt a tug at her back, something cold and sharp wrapping around her waist. She gasped and turned to see that a shadow had leaped from the ground and latched onto her, gripping her tightly. Panic surged through her veins. The trees began to fade into the mist, reality warping as only pure darkness remained. What if we don't make it? Jess thought, the question pulsating as her grip on hope weakened. With one last effort, Jess faced the encroaching dark, determination lighting her features. She wasn't going down without a fight. But as she gathered her strength, another figure loomed out from the fog, and it wore a face that was all too familiar. Would this new presence be a savior or another shadow? Jess's pulse quickened with dread. The choice they had made might just lead them into deeper darkness. Jess's mind raced as the familiar figure stepped closer through the fog. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing like a ticking clock. There, emerging from the swirling mist, was her older brother Alex. His normally cheerful face was twisted into a grimace, the shadowy contours hiding what was once warm and inviting. "Alex?" Jess called out, her voice barely a whisper, swallowed by the relentless fog. "Is that really you?" He hesitated, dark eyes locking onto hers. "Jess, you shouldn't be here." His voice dripped with an urgency that sent chills down her spine. "What do you mean?" Jess felt the shadows pulling harder now, tightening their grip around her. She struggled against them, casting desperate glances back to Sarah, Mark, and Jake. They were just out of reach, battling at the edge of a darkness that threatened to consume them. "It's not safe." Alex's silhouette shifted, and for a brief instant, his face looked almost human, a reflection of love and protection. "You have to trust me, please. You need to leave this place." "Leave?" Jess scoffed, her fear morphing into a surge of anger. "You don't understand. We can't just leave Sarah." The shadows hissed, a chorus of anguish threading through the air. Jess felt the icy fingers wrap tighter around her waist, squeezing the breath from her lungs. She couldn't lose Sarah. "Sarah?" Alex took a step closer, concern mingling with fear in his voice. "Listen to me. You have to get out. It's coming for you all, and it won't stop until it gets what it wants." "What does it want?" Jess demanded, her voice edged with desperation. Swallowing her fear, she reached deeper into the fog, trying to ignore the voices whispering just behind her. The shadows flickered violently, and Jess felt the warmth of Alex's hand brush against hers, fleeting. "It hungers for your fear. It senses your doubts, your emotions, it feeds on them." Another scream from Sarah shattered Jess's fleeting resolve, ripping through the air like a knife. "I won't abandon her." The darkness reacted violently, surging forward, leaving Jess struggling to breathe. The grip of shadows seemed alive, and Jess felt their icy tendrils slither against her skin. "Jess!" Jake shouted, a raw pain in his voice. "We need to help her. You can't just get back." Mark yelled, brandishing the branch with a frantic intensity. "It'll drag you down with it." "Mark!" Alex called back, shifting his focus. "You need to hold her down. No matter the cost." Jess's mind whirred with confusion, unsure of whom to trust, the brother she loved or the friends who stood by her side against the encroaching dark. Just then, she caught a glimpse of the shadow behind Alex, a massive figure looming closer, ravenous and filled with rage. "Stop!" she screamed, but the words fell upon deaf ears. The shadow surged and struck, and in the chaos that followed, Jess felt Alex's hand slip from hers. The darkness swallowed him whole. "No!" Jess cried out, but the words were knocked from her lungs by the imminent tidal wave of shadow. "Get them out!" Alex's voice echoed from the depth of the fog, a sound mixed with despair as he vanished into a sea of darkness. "Jess!" Jake pulled her back to reality, eyes wild, as he scrambled towards Sarah, desperate to retrieve her from the inky depths. Just then, a piercing scream split the air. Not Sarah, not Mark. A new, heart-stopping cry that sent an electric current of fear racing down Jess's spine. Something's wrong, something's coming. Jess felt it in her bones, a churning dread descending upon them all. Mark stumbled, eyes wide with terror. We have to run now. But Jess stood frozen, unable to shake the echo of Alex's warning from her thoughts. She could still hear his voice through the thick fog, urging her to leave, to turn back. Would her next decision be their salvation or their ultimate downfall? The darkness loomed, and she could almost feel it breathing down her neck, ready to consume them all. The fog thickened, cocooning Jess in a shroud of fear. Panic clawed at her throat, but a strange determination, raw and defiant, held her still. I can't leave them! She screamed into the void, the sound ricocheting off the unseen walls of darkness. Jess! Jake's voice shattered the silence like glass, snapping her back to her friends. Just ahead, his silhouette was barely discernible, straining towards Sarah, who was still lost to the shadows. Mark, brandishing his makeshift weapon, moved as if in slow motion, swinging wildly, trying to carve a path through the encroaching dark. Sarah, hold on! He shouted, but his voice trembled, crushed under the weight of unease. Jess felt a violent tug at her heart. Every scream echoed in her ears, each one dripping with desperation and dread. She could see shadows writhing, serpentine figures twisting and turning just beyond her reach, feeding on the fear in the air. Jake, help me! Jess yelled, taking a step toward the chaos. But the ground beneath her shifted, an unnatural pulse resonating upward, vibrating like the disturbed surface of a lake. I'm coming! His response was immediate, but as he rushed towards her, the edges of the fog unfurled into a maw, a gaping void stretching wide before them. It beckoned with dark promises, twisting shadows alive with malice. Don't get too close, Mark warned, eyes wide with terror. Stay back. But Jess couldn't tear her gaze away. Sarah! Jess cried again, the name felt like a lifeline. We're coming for you. The shadows shrieked in response. Their angry whispers roared into the calm, drowning her out. They swarmed toward Jake, their icy fingers seeking to ensnare him. Move! Jess pushed past her growing fear, diving forward just as Jake stumbled backward. She caught his arm, yanking him toward the flickers of light that danced like stars in the blackness, the faint glimmers of their hope. Suddenly, the sound of gnashing teeth tore through the air, an unnatural growl that sent a jolt of ice curling through Jess's veins. What is that? She gasped. It's here! Mark shouted, panic spilling from his voice. He dropped the branch, the splintered wood thudding against the ground. We can't fight it. We need to run. Jess blurted, an outburst of fierce defiance. She turned to face the shadowy mass enveloping Sarah. You want fear? You'll have to take it from me. Drawing a shaky breath, Jess took a step forward into the dark. There was a desperate calm inside her, a flicker of resilience against the crushing dread. The shadows recoiled, hissing, as if her courage physically repelled their advance. Jess, no! Jake reached out, but she pressed on. Stay back. Trust me. Her heart pounded as she faced the swirling chaos. Somewhere within, she felt a connection to Sarah, a thread of their unyielding friendship, tugging her forward. Hold on, we're coming! Jess shouted again, her voice steadying like a fortress wall. With a deep breath, she plunged deeper into the fog, embracing the shadows engulfing her. Suddenly, a crushing weight fell on her shoulders, anchoring her to the ground. Jess staggered, choking as the darkness twisted around her. She saw flickers of movement, figures emerging from the chaos. Then she saw them, glimpses of Sarah's determined face, eyes wide and frantic. The shadows fought to pull her back, but Jess's heart burned brighter than the shadows' grasp. Sarah! Jess cried out fiercely. Fight it! We'll get through! But the struggles grew, the shadows inching closer like a monstrous tide. Jess, it's too late. Sarah's voice was a whisper coated in terror. No! The desperation in Jess's scream echoed through the fog, drowning in the impending darkness that promised to consume them both. A crack of thunder sounded overhead, rattling Jess's bones as the shadows roared, their laughter mingling with howls of despair. An unexpected burst of light emerged from behind her, illuminating the fog momentarily. Then everything shifted. The darkness writhed, faltered, and for a heartbeat, Jess felt the chaos pause. Was this their chance? Or merely a trick of the shadows? The ground trembled once more, and time seemed to stand still. Jess's heart raced. She needed to make a choice, and she had only seconds before the tide came crashing down. What awaited her when the shadows resumed their relentless grip? And would anyone emerge from this darkness unscathed? Light flickered, casting elongated shadows that darted around like frantic fireflies searching for safety. Jess felt its warmth seep into her, a brief refuge in an ocean of despair. But it wasn't enough, and the darkness was clawing back, hungry for their fear. "Jess, help me!" Sarah's voice broke through, a pleading note that sliced through Jess's heart. The glow pulsed again, illuminating the nightmare swirling around them. For that fleeting moment, Jess could see the tendrils of shadow refracting in the light, twisting like serpents coiling around a helpless prey. Her breath hitched. It was now or never. "Jess! Don't you dare let it take her!" Mark's voice cracked as he lunged toward them, but the shadows shrieked, a thunderous roar that threatened to overwhelm everything. They were relentless now, pressing closer, hungry for both Jess and Sarah, eager to snuff out the light. "I'm coming for you, Sarah!" Jess shouted, fighting the weight of the darkness threatening to smother her. With renewed resolve, she forced her feet forward, each step a monumental battle against the icy grip encircling her ankles. Yet, as she approached Sarah, the ground trembled again, and the shadows reacted, spiraling around Sarah and drawing her deeper. Jess felt a ripple of fear, every inch closer, tightening its grip around her throat. "Don't let go! We're stronger together!" Jess called as she extended her hand, heart racing madly. The distance felt agonizingly cruel. Just a few more steps, but Sarah was visibly fading, her luminous spirit dimming under the onslaught. "You have to run! Get out, Jess!" she shouted back, and Jess felt her heart shatter at the thought. "I won't leave you!" The desperation poured from her lips, manifesting as a helpful force, a protective shield that pushed against the encroaching shadows. The air was thick with their malevolent whispers, taunting and promising despair. Suddenly, a howling screech echoed through the fog, a cry of discontent from the darkness, as if the shadows were alive, responding to Jess's strength with anger. In a blink, the figures surged forward. Panic struck Jess like lightning. "Run!" She yelled at Jake and Mark, but there was no time. They were out of options. Then, with a primal roar, she lunged forward, plunging her hand into the heavy mists. "I won't let you take her!" she screamed, feeling warmth seep from her fingertips, as though the very essence of her will was pouring out. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed Mark swing his makeshift weapon again, desperately slashing at the invading darkness only to have it recoil just a bit, as if recognizing her defiance. "Keep fighting!" Jess shouted, determination fueling her voice as she reached for Sarah one more time. "You're almost there." In that moment, Jess felt an electric charge course through her. The shadows writhed in agony, pulling back from her light, and Sarah's face brightened with flickering hope. "Jess!" she cried, her voice breaking the fog as the strands of fate twisted and turned just barely out of reach, and yet chaos erupted once more as the shadows lashed out, catching Jess off guard. A powerful force slammed into her, sending her tumbling as darkness enveloped her vision, the screams of her friends drowned in swirling despair. She fell onto the damp earth, the weight of the shadows pressing against her. Time seemed to lose its grip. A suffocating stillness wrapped around her, and in that darkness, Jess's mind raced. Had she lost everyone? Were they gone forever? The shadows hesitated, casting fleeting glimpses of light. There in the void, a faint whisper began to cut through the fear. Was it Sarah? Or something else? An image from their past, a memory dearer than any material sense of security. Yet in the heart of that darkness, Jess felt something, the tiniest flicker of belief. "I will not give in," she muttered, feeling the pulse of her heart sinking with the torment around her. Would this flicker be enough to shatter the suffocating hold? As Jess focused on the glimmer of hope, a surge of warmth enveloped her, the shadows recoiling once more. But questions loomed heavy. Could she reverse their grasp, or would she become just another lost spirit drifting within that fog? With a breath, Jess knew she had but one shot left. What would happen next? What horrors waited as the shadows trembled on the edge of her resolve? The darkness pulsed heavily around Jess, an oppressive weight that threatened to crush every ounce of her resolve. But the flicker of belief grew brighter, warm and familiar, even as her body ached. She focused on it, the memory of laughter shared with Sarah beneath the sun, their dreams echoing like distant chimes. And in that agony, when shadows loomed like ancient monsters, she felt the flicker turn into a flame. Jess pushed against the weight, using the warmth of her heart to propel her forward. "Sarah!" she shouted again, voice raw and fierce. She couldn't give in. Not now. The shadows writhed in furious discontent, their whispers turning into hisses, a cacophony of rage and loss swirling around her. With one last surge, Jess threw herself toward the darkness, vision narrowed on the outline of her friend trapped within. Just then, Mark's figure loomed beside her, a flash of determination in his eyes. "Hold on, Jess!" he shouted, gripping her arm tightly. The connection sent a ripple of strength through Jess. Together, they could do this. As if sensing their newfound unity, the shadows recoiled yet again, tendrils retreating with reluctant anger. "Keep faith. Together, we can fight it!" she cried, her voice now a resonating beacon that cut through the oppressive gloom. With every word, the shadows shuddered, distorting with the intensity of her intent. Sarah's face came into view, her eyes glistening, filled with both fear and hope. "Please," her voice trembled, a haunting echo of desperation. Drawing in a deep breath, Jess let the warmth surge through her, the bond between her and Sarah becoming undeniable. "Take my hand!" With that, Jess extended her hand, but the distance felt impossibly vast. Suddenly, the earth split beneath them, a violent shockwave that sent Jess sprawling. Dark hands clawed at her, pulling her back into the abyss. Panic flooded her system. "Mark! Help!" she screamed, but the shadows hissed back, silencing her pleas. Mark's grip tightened, dragging her back to safety. "I want to let it take you," he roared as he swung his weapon again, distracting the dark forces that swirled hungrily toward Jess. Jess felt the ground shift. The shadows tugged at her consciousness, whispering dread-filled promises of despair. "You can't save her," they taunted, voices cold and sharp. But Jess fought against the fear. "No! You don't get to decide." With renewed determination, she spun towards Sarah, who was fading into the darkness. "Jess, I'm Sarah," gasped, and Jess's heart crumpled at the sight of her friend, her light flickering, feeling all too far away. "Stop!" she yelled at the shadows, fury igniting inside her like an inferno. And within that bright flame, she felt an awakening, a surge of power blooming from the very bonds of friendship and love. "You're weak. You only feed on despair." The shadows writhed and screeched, a hideous roar echoing through the void. But Jess pressed forward, forcing her heart to swell with light. An explosion of brightness shattered the darkness as Jess stumbled, every ounce of fear being blasted away. With a desperate lunge, she reached for Sarah, feeling the pulsating connection draw her in like a moth to a flame. "Hold on!" Jess screamed, her voice a battle cry against the encroaching darkness. Just as her fingertips brushed against Sarah's, the air crackled. A massive pulse erupted from their combined force, sending shockwaves through the shadows. But just as victory seemed within her grasp, something snapped. The ground tilted, darkness swirling chaotically around them. "Jess! We have to go, now!" Mark's arms pulled at her, but Sarah's eyes locked onto Jess, pleading. Jess hesitated, the choice tearing at her heart. If they left now, would Sarah be lost forever? "I want to abandon you." As the shadows lunged once more, hungry for their light, Jess faced a choice. Stay and fight, or flee into uncertain safety. The darkness screamed, closing in fast, insatiable and consuming. What would Jess choose? The decision felt monumental. Had she truly found her strength against the shadows, or was it too late? The darkness crashed around them, threatening to swallow everything whole. Jess was spiraling, the shadows swirling with a deafening fury that threatened to pull her down. The air was thick with dread, and for a brief moment, she felt everything slip through her grasp. Panic surged through her veins, icy and relentless. "Sarah!" she screamed, her voice cracking against the howling darkness. Mark's grip was still firm, but it felt like a fragile thread. "We have to get out of here," he urged, urgency etched across his features. Jess looked back at Sarah, her heart wrenching as desperation flooded her vision. Sarah was fading, her light a mere whisper against the tide of shadows that licked hungrily at their feet. "No! I can't leave her!" Jess shouted, defiance growing within her like a wildfire. She pulled against Mark's hold, every fiber of her being screaming to save her friend. "I won't abandon her. Jess, I get it. But if we don't move, all of us are going to be lost." Mark shot back, his eyes wide with fear. The ground beneath them trembled as if alive, quaking in response to their turmoil. Jess's pulse raced. The shadows were pulling closer, reaching with claw-like hands, and shrieking voices clawed at her mind, sowing seeds of doubt. "You'll never save her," they hissed, cold and mocking. "You can't even save yourself." "Shut up!" Jess shouted, clenching her fists. Memories of laughter, joy, and adventures filled her mind, their shared dreams forcing her heart to pulse with hope. She squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, forcing everything else out. "I won't let you take her." Suddenly, an explosion of light burst from her core, radiating outward. Jess could feel the energy coursing through her, igniting every inch of her being. It felt like Sarah reaching back, a tether so bright, so powerful that it illuminated the shadows for a brief moment. "Take my hand, Sarah. Please!" Jess begged, fighting through the swirling darkness. She felt the overwhelming tug of darkness, but that light, the connection, was undeniable. It surged through her, a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. Mark glanced around, sensing the shadows tightening their grip on all of them. "We need to go, Jess. Now!" But every sound from him felt muffled against the roar of her heart. In that fleeting moment, Jess's desperation transformed into determination. She summoned the last bit of strength from deep within. "You won't take her from me." Her voice exploded with authority, reverberating through the chaos. One last desperate push, a lunge towards Sarah, and in that split second, Jess felt something crack within the dark. The shadows hissed and writhed, a wild chaotic dance as light fought back, pushing through. She stretched her hand, their fingers almost touching. "I can reach you. Just a little more," Jess cried, feeling the warmth of Sarah's hope intertwining with her own. But then, the darkness roared back in fury, and the ground shook violently as a fissure tore through the earth, separating them. Jess fell forward, sickeningly aware of the distance stretching taut between them. The shadows flashed violently, growing darker and more chaotic, as if the very essence of despair was flooding in to consume them. "Mark!" Jess shouted, panic rising as the shadows surged toward her again. "I got you!" he growled, pulling her back, but Jess could still feel Sarah slipping further away, the hope in her eyes dimming. "Just hold on!" Jess shouted to Sarah, a plea filled with fear and a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. But the darkness was relentless, shrieking louder than ever, drowning out all reason. As Jess was pulled further into the safety of Mark's embrace, she felt the last of their connection begin to fade. A horrible realization struck her. "No, I won't let go." But as darkness thrashed around them, they stumbled backward from the edge. "Jess, we can't stay!" Mark yelled, and the ground beneath her buckled, sending another tremor through the chaos. Would she lose Sarah forever? She had to make a choice. Choose safety or fight the darkness tooth and nail. The decision sat heavy on her chest, and time itself felt like it hung suspended in the air. With shadows clawing at her back, Jess leaned into Mark, hope dwindling, clinging to the remnants of light. But there, in the overwhelming chaos, something deep within her whispered that hope was not lost yet, What was the true price of saving someone you loved? The darkness hissed, waiting for her next move. Jess struggled against the shadows, her heart hammering against her ribs. Time felt suspended, yet the darkness throbbed in urgency around her, a predator waiting to consume its prey. I can't! I can't leave her! She screamed. Mark's grip tightened around her as he pulled her closer, his eyes wide with terror. We have to get out, Jess. If we stay, we'll all be lost. His voice cracked, a flicker of fear mingling with resolve, his desperate fight for their survival. Sarah's face was just a shadow now, her spirit flickering like a candle in a storm. Go, Jess! I can't hold on much longer! She shouted, and despair twisted in Jess's heart sharper than any knife. No! I won't let you fade away! Jess felt tears burning her eyes. They were mixed with determination and fear. The shadows writhed, closing in with predatory glee, their whispers clawing at her mind. You will lose her, you are all alone, they mocked, a maddening cacophony weaving through the fog. But in that moment, Jess discovered something deep inside her, a fierce, defiant fire ignited by her love for Sarah. You think you can have us? You think you can take my friends from me? Armed with defiance, Jess thrust her hands outward. I won't let fear control us. The shadows shrieked, recoiling from her sudden surge of light. Jess felt warmth radiating from her chest, a powerful force swelling as she fought back against the darkness. We're not afraid of you, she declared, each word reverberating with a strength she didn't know she possessed. Then her spirit blazed brighter. She could see Sarah's face once again, almost tangible in the chaos. Take my hand! Jess yelled, reaching forward, though the distance felt insurmountable. I'm trying, Jess. Please don't give up. I'm right here. Sarah's voice wavered, battling against the darkness with every ounce of her will. Behind Jess, the shadows howled louder, thrashing as if threatened. Together, we can break free! Jess cried out, her breath hitching with urgency. With a desperate leap, she dove into the chaos, ignoring the biting cold that threatened to seize her heart. We can do this, we're stronger together. Mark stepped back, sensing the energy between them as they fought not just for survival, but for one another. No shadows can have us! He shouted, wielding the makeshift branch again, knocking back the encroaching dark with raw determination. Every scream from Sarah fueled Jess's fire, every echo of despair pushed her further into the fight. Fight, Sarah! Fight for us! Jess felt strength radiate through her limbs. It was not just her resolve, but their shared memories flooding back like warmth after a winter chill. The laughter beneath the sun, their dreams igniting the air with hope, and then, as if the shadows recognized the power of their bond, they writhed in fury. You think you've won? They hissed, you cannot escape your fate. But Jess stood firm. Watch us! She shouted, summoning every ounce of power, pushing through the pain. We will not succumb to despair. In one synchronized motion, Jess and Sarah reached for each other, fingers outstretched across the divide, the light within them flickering intensively. The shadows surged, spitting and racing forward with an unholy fury. You cannot, but before they could finish, a wave of light erupted, scattering darkness around with unbearably brilliant light. It was a pulse of hope, a force emanating from their unity, and as their hands finally met, it became a supernova of power that ruptured the shadows around them. Jess! Sarah's voice combined with Jess's shout in a final reprise, the echoes ringing through the void before silence fell. And with the flicker fading to a soft, warm glow, Jess felt connection return, solid, strong, and alive. The shadows shrieked in terror, dissipating like mist under the sun. As light flooded the darkness, Jess felt the ground steady beneath her feet. She turned to see Sarah, restored and whole, standing next to Mark, the fear and uncertainty melting away. They were shaken but together, holding tight to one another through the aftermath. Did we? Mark panted, glancing around. The fog thinned, revealing a break in the oppressive gloom. No shadows, Sarah breathed, disbelief widening her eyes. Hope shimmered around them, the lighthouse now standing proudly against the brightening sky. Jess looked back at the dark horizon that had threatened to consume them. "We did it!" she exclaimed, fists clenched, heart soaring. Relief washed over them, binding them in shared strength as they stood together, a circle of illuminated warmth. Maybe they weren't just friends after all. Maybe they were family. Determination surged in Jess's chest as she took a deep breath, preparing for the journey back to light, the lighthouse now a symbol of survival. Let us never lose sight of this. Never again. As they steadied themselves, the dawn began to break, colors spilling vibrant hues across the horizon. The shadows had been chased away, and as they turned toward the sea free and filled with gratitude, Jess knew they would carry this bond with them always. With hearts lightened, they stepped forth, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. But this is just the beginning. Don't leave just yet. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss any exclusive stories like this again. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this incredible conclusion. Your support makes all the difference.